Thank you for clicking on this video, and welcome to Ultraman Explained. My name's Spencer, and I'm your narrator here at the channel. It's been a while since I posted a video, so I decided to go through the comments and read some of your guys' statements, your feelings, your requests, and things of that nature. And after going through all of my video's comments, or at least most of them, I came to a pretty clear conclusion. We need to talk about Ultraman names, and names of the beings and creatures in the Ultraman universe. Because there seems to be a bit of confusion between how they're named, what they're named, and how it's pronounced. I have read across many names in the Ultraman universe, what they mean, how they got their names, and so on and so forth. So today, I have decided to use 3 or 4 examples to help further explain to you how they get their names, how they're pronounced, and to bring further clarification, let's get started. Example 1, Ultraman Agul. Now I understand how you guys may feel that I am pronouncing it incorrectly, as you have commonly heard it said one way throughout much of the Ultraman universe and much of the Ultraman series. However, the name itself, Agul, is actually based upon the Hispanic or Spanish or Mexican word azul, which means blue in Spanish. So that is what they are basing that name on. Instead of Azul, Ultraman Azul, they made it Ultraman Agul. Now, what that refers to, like most Ultraman names, is a status about them or a trait about them, or it somehow relates back to the Ultraman itself as a defining character. In this case, it's a reference to what color that Ultraman is. Ultraman Agul is blue, and blue in Spanish is azul, and when naming Ultraman, Tsuburaya Productions, Ultramen, Tsuburaya Productions looks out to other cultures to borrow names. So it's a perfect matchup for a blue Ultraman to be named Ultraman Azul, or to change it so it's not so blatantly obvious, Ultraman Agul. Now you might be thinking,
that's not how they say it in the show! That's not even how they pronounce it in the English dubs!
We must remember, my friends, that Tsuburaya Productions likes to borrow names for their Ultramen and women from other cultures and other languages. This gives the character more dynamics and makes them seem more interesting. However, in the Japanese pronunciation of words from other cultures, just like if I were to try to speak another language outside of my own, it just so happens I do speak a few languages, but if I were to try to speak a language outside of my own, I would pronounce it probably a little funny. The same way Japan does when they try to pronounce some of these words and names borrowed for their Ultraman that come from other cultures. So, to be simple, just because the Japanese say it that way, doesn't mean that's actually how it's said. You need to look into where they got the name from, what culture it came from, and how that culture itself pronounces the name. That simple.
Number 2.
Ultraman Sophie. Now, this is the Ultraman I probably get corrected on saying, probably the second most out of any of them. Whenever I say this Ultraman's name, you guys and girls, all get very, very upset and tell me I'm saying it incorrectly. And that would be Ultraman Sophie. But let me explain to you why I pronounce it that way, and how this Ultraman got their name. As previously stated, when Tsuburaya Productions is choosing the names for their Ultramen, they will commonly look for other cultures, other nations, other tongues, other languages, other places, as many other ways as I can say it. They look other places for their names rather than in Japan. They think it adds different flavor to each character and makes each character sound more new, exciting, and just not something typical to Japan. So the same can be said for Ultraman Sophie. Now, when Tsuburaya Productions came up with Ultraman Sophie, or just Sophie, they were only in the first series of Ultraman, which was currently based around Ultraman Hayata. Well, they wanted a superior, so they wanted someone to be stronger than Ultraman Hayata, who Ultraman Hayata would need to show allegiance to and respect to. So they wanted to find a strong, cultured name that would go along with him, or just a strong-sounding name to go along with him, so when you heard his name, you knew that he was a character of importance. Now, a question I get asked often is why it's often just said as Zophy instead of Ultraman Zophy. Now, the reason for this is because at the time of the creation of the first Ultraman series, not Ultra Q, but just Ultraman, they were unsure if they were going to call any of the other Ultra beings Ultraman, then their name. They just kind of set on calling them their name at that time. Then, as the series afterwards came out, they decided to start adding the moniker Ultraman before every one of their names. Now, when choosing Zophy's name, they started looking around and they wanted to choose a strong sounding language, so they chose German. So they looked into Germany and started looking at German names to see what names meant strength, what names represented all of the characteristics that they wanted Zophy to represent. And they found the name Sophie. Now, unbeknownst to them, which you can't blame them for, it's not their culture's name, but unbeknownst to them, Sophie is actually a girl's name. So they gave one of the first created to be the strongest Ultraman characters a girl's name, thinking that it was a male name. Granted, in German culture, Sophie is a strong character name. You know, it's a strong name for a strong female who represents, pride, loyalty, respect, and demands all of that. The same thing that the creators of Tsuburaya wanted for Ultraman Zophy, or just Zophy. Now, that's the reason I say it as Zophy when it comes to saying the name, because originally this Ultraman was going to be Ultraman Sophie. But because of the Japanese having trouble saying the name Sophie, it came out as Ultraman Zophy. And then since then, or Zophy, since then, it's been mispronounced a whole heck of a lot of different ways, such as Zophy, Zophy, which is most correct, or Zuffy, or all these other crazy incarnations, when in essence it really just is Ultraman Zophy. As again, coming from its original root, Sophie. Number 3, Ultraman Belial. The beautiful thing about this character is I can already hear those of you angrily typing away at your keyboards on how I just pronounced his name, as Ultraman Belial is the single most corrected name that you guys give to me every time I say it, as if I am saying it so wrong. As if there's no possible way that I could even be pronouncing it close to what it really is. And the logical explanation you guys always give me is, it's not how they say it in the Japanese dubs. But what have we learned today? They borrow their names from other cultures, often from different languages, and they don't exactly always pronounce them correctly. The same can be said for Ultraman Belial. Now, let me break this down for you. Ultraman Belial was and was set to be the ultimate evil being in the Ultraman universe. He was created to be, pretty much in a light-speaking way, the epitome of the devil. He is created to be the absolute evil in the Ultraman universe. Often nothing topping him. He's supposed to be like an overlord. You know, he is like the Joker to the Batman in the Ultraman universe. You know, he would be like, Joker as to Ultraman Belial is to Ultraman to Batman, if we were doing an analogy. Now, when they were creating him, they needed a name to epitomize that. They needed a name that would mean something strong, evil, have fear behind it. And when people heard it, just inherently knew it meant something bad. And the character that was tied to it was just a ruthless, tough individual. So they chose Belial. Now, again, you guys, I can already hear you angrily typing away, saying I'm mispronouncing it. However, the truth is, I'm not. Belial is actually an Old English word. It is a name, actually, for one of the many demons of hell, one of the actual top tier demons in hell. It is pronounced Belial. B-E-L-I-A-L. Belial. It is an Old English word. Speaking English myself and having friends who live directly in England, so I can ask even with the accent, it is pronounced Belial. And it's pronounced that way in the Bible and in many other situations like Dante's Inferno when they're talking about the various devils and this, that, and the other. It is Belial. However, because of all the things associated with the name, because it was actually a name for a devil, it was evil, it sounded strong, the Japanese, you know, and that led Tsuburaya Productions were like, yes, let's take that name, it'll be perfect, it'll represent our character awesomely. However, two things happened. One, the name was a little bit harder to say than they had planned for, and two, I don't think the Japanese at Tsuburaya Productions or the voice actors were ready for pronouncing the L's in succession when saying the name. This led to them calling him Ultraman Belial, and then everyone since then saying the same thing. All Ultraman fans, all throughout the Ultraman universe, Ultraman Belial, which every time I say it properly, which is Belial, everyone corrects me and they're like, no, it's pronounced Belial. That's how they say it in the show. But guys and girls, please remember, this is another name borrowed from another culture. So, for the Japanese, it's not of their native dialect, so it's a little bit harder for them to pronounce, just like it would be me, first, and you guys have heard in some of the Japanese names from the Japanese culture. It's just the same thing. And if you want to get actually really technical, it's Belial. But Belial works, or I guess if you continue to want to say it as Belial, more power to you. For sake of time, we'll go ahead and stop at 3 examples. I was going to give the 4th example of Ultraman Mebius, or Ultraman Mebius, because of how many times I've been corrected in saying that. However, in my research, I have found that actually both pronunciations are correct, because it's based off the Mobius strip, so you could either say Ultraman Mebius, because they dropped the O, in which case it would be M-E-B-I-U-S, Mebius, or you can say it with a hard E, because originally the O and the E together would have made a hard letter sound, so it could also be said as Mebius, again, being an English word adopted by Tsuburaya Productions in Japan. So I was going to keep that as an example for number 4 and get more into it, but I feel like now with all that I've given you, hopefully you'll go out and be interested and excited to kind of check into what some of your favorite Ultraman names mean, where they come from, what culture they come from, and why they were chosen for that specific Ultraman. As remember, all Ultraman names, even the villains, have some way of relating back to the characteristics of that character, or the looks of that character, or what they're aiming for that character to be. So tonight, when you're bored, or the next time you get a free moment, hop on Google and start researching your favorite characters in the Ultraman universe to see exactly where their etymology comes from, or what their name means. I assure you, it will be fun, you'll find out a lot of interesting information, and I'm sure it'll change the way you look at some of your favorite Ultra beings and kaiju. Well, that'll about bring to end this video. I do apologize for the length, but under the conditions I'm working in, I gotta kind of work with what I've got, so I'm changing my process a little bit. But I hope you guys still enjoyed it, and I hope that you did indeed find some new information from this video that you didn't previously know. If you did, go ahead and leave a like below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to share it with your friends and subscribe to the channel so that you can see more videos just like this and become a member of the Ultra family today. Thank you again for watching, and you have a safe night. Or day. Bye!